So today I would like to talk about simulations and characterization of solar cells. Briefly speaking, we can divide the challenges in three different categories: efficiency, enhancement, stability, and upscaling. And this is what we want to address with our tools. So I'm from the company Fluxim that should help you to achieve a better efficiency, understand device stability, and hopefully also upscaling. But we do not only deliver these tools, we also contribute to research ourselves. And so this is what I would like to show you today, a bit of what we do in these three categories based on three examples that we recently developed. So in the first study, we collaborated with UPO and IMEC on these cells, and this study was also published, as you can see in this reference. So we looked in this study at formamidinium-based perovskite, and what they added in this perovskite is an excess of FAI in the precursor solution. And this has been done in literature before. There have been different effects reported that there is a reduced barrier and interface recombination in this paper, but also that there is an improved photostability because of ions that compensate intrinsically present vacancies. In this study, we looked in a similar direction in a systematic variation of FAI excess and looked at the performance short-term stability effect, but then also linked this to the ionic parameters. So first, the efficiency, just looking at these JV curves, we can see that there is a clear trend. When you add more and more FAI, first you get an improvement in performance, whereas afterwards you clearly see a reduction in mainly short circuit current, but also fill factor and VOC that is reduced. And there is a similar trend also in the stabilized efficiency measurement, that the more FAI you add, the longer it gets until you reach a steady state performance, while the other cells, especially the reference one, already starts to degrade right from the start. What they did then was to look at impedance spectroscopy results of these cells, and these are two representations of the same data. And what you can see in the focus is that this low frequency peak, and that is usually assigned to ions, is moving to higher frequencies the more formamidinium iodide excess you add to the system. And yeah, this has been modeled before. This is simulation software from this paper, where you can see that this shift can be directly linked to a diffusivity increase of the ions. And yeah, basically this is what they saw. This shift was then directly or the trend was identical to the trend that was observed for the short circuit current. And so the idea was to correlate this ion diffusivity and explain why this leads to a lower short circuit current density. For this, we used simulation software ZFOS, built up this model and looked at steady state and impedance data. And basically, these are already the results. So we can see in the experiment the shift that I explained before. And in the simulation, you can see that when you increase either the ion density or the ion mobility, you get basically the same shift of this low frequency peak. However, if you now look at another representation of the same data, so this Cole plot, you see that only if you change the ion density in the simulation, you see this increase of these semicircles that were also observed in the experiment. So from this comparison, you can conclude that when we add formamidinium iodide excess into the precursor, you change the ion density in your system. And can this now also explain the steady state results? So the efficiency, yes, it can qualitatively, to a certain extent, explain the drop in short circuit current, as you can see here. So here we just changed the ion density in the steady state JV simulation, and you can see that this drop occurs also in the simulation. And this is very simple. You can look at the profiles here, potential profiles are shown. If you increase the ion density, you simply have a screening effect, and this limits charge extraction, and so reduces your short circuit current. In the second study, I would like to look at stability, which was done with the collaborators at EMPA. So the system that we looked at was perovskite subcell that would in the end be used in a tandem configuration with a CIS bottom cell. And yeah, we looked at the stability and mainly looked at the effect of different temperatures doing MPP tracking, and performed also intermediate JV scans to understand a bit more what is going on in the cell and which parameters are changing during degradation. So here are the results for the different temperatures. Overall, you can see a similar decrease and also the shape of the degradation curves. Clearly, the temperature enhances the degradation. So this was very, very clearly observable. We looked a bit into the details of the key figures. So here first the short circuit current, or no, the MPP current is shown, and the voltage at MPP. And basically you see that the voltage is not really changed. Either it even improves for the room temperature cells, or does only little decrease for the enhanced temperatures, whereas the current clearly shows a decrease. And the same trends are basically observed when you do these intermittent JV scans. You see that VOC is stable for the room temperature device, short circuit current is decreasing, while the fill factor is also rather stable over this time. So we looked a bit into more details what happens inside the device, and for this we use this OCVD technique, which is basically shining light on a solar cell that is kept at VOC and looking at the decay when you switch off the light. And what you see in general are traces of free carriers. At longer time scale, you see the ion response, and eventually some parasitic parallel. Okay. Sorry, can you still see me? Hear me?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, sorry, I had a timeout somehow. Yeah, and at the long time scale, you see basically the parallel resistance either of the cell or of the measurement instrument. And so here we show two results, one of the fresh cell and one of the aged cell. And basically do not look at this first initial decrease, but more at this longer time scale where we see the ions. And there is clearly a significant change in this one. We then use this procedure to determine from this capacitive transient, basically the ion density, according to this paper by Fischer. And what you can see is clearly that for all the light intensities that we measured, you see that there is an increase in ion density from the fresh to the aged device. That's in this quantitative even more than 2 orders of magnitude. And if you remember from the previous study, this ion density increase can indeed explain a decrease in short circuit current that we also saw experimentally in this study. And in the last study, I would like to go a bit into this upscaling world. We looked here at solar cells that are this mesoporous structure, which are inkjet or screen printed and have an active area of 1.5 square centimeters. So it's not yet really upscaling, but yeah, it goes in this direction. In this project that we perform with Solaronics, we want to look at different imaging techniques, combining electro, photo, and luminescence and dark locking thermography images, correlate these images, but then also correlate the findings in these images with electro-optical characterization, JV curves, but also impedance spectroscopy results. And one observation that we had was in this electroluminescence imaging, and clearly there is a very interesting phenomena that if you switch on 1.2 volt, or if you apply 1.2 volts to the cell, you see this transient electroluminescence effect. So you first have an increase in luminescence, whereas afterwards you see a more or less steady state lower emission from the cell. This has also been reported before for such devices, so it was not really new, but we tried to use the simulation and characterization tools now to understand and give an explanation why this could occur in our imaging. And so in order to do that, we did various electro-optical characterization techniques, steady state, JV curves, but also impedance signals with light and even IMPS. And to build a model, we tried to fit all of them. You can see that some of these are already feasibly well fitting the experimental results, but others do not yet. So it's a model that reproduces part of the cell, but it's not yet a perfect model, I would say. And yeah, with this directly coming to the conclusion, we can now use this model and just simulate such a transient effect, including all the ions. And what you can see is that you see the same overshoot in the simulation as you see in the measurement. And so this could be an explanation that there are ions involved, of course, not really a surprise, and that these ions determine this transient effect. If you wonder why there are two different lines and there is a spatial inhomogeneity, I'm referring to the last speaker of today, Evelyn. She will give a more detailed explanation about these two curves here. And with this, I'm at the end of the talk. I hope I could show you how we combine electro-optical characterization and device simulation to understand efficiency limitations, stability issues, and go also into upscaling and try to explain the transient EL effects and of course, everything.